When folks inquire about my origins, I mention Mapleton, Ohio, since it's simpler than gesturing toward a patch nestled between twin river settlements and spinning a lengthy tale of sprawling cornfields, rumbling freight cars, and a vast sky that might part like an immense yawn. Mapleton's the sort of town where summer air carries the scent of steaming asphalt and freshly mown lawns, where the 4th of July procession circles the town square a second time just to stretch out the path. Our home was a sturdy brick structure with weathered green window coverings and a veranda out front that perpetually tilted slightly leftward, much like a weary fellow slouching when he believes no one's observing. That slanted veranda served as the backdrop where my existence truly commenced. If you're someone who views existence as a theatrical production complete with scenery, prompts, and spectators, I don't always share that perspective, though occasionally I do. I'm the baby of the family, the second daughter. My siblings called Madison, but from my mom's lips it emerged gentler, almost like syrup melting sweetly. Maddie. I'm Emma. From my mom's lips, my name carried a warning edge. Mia. That subtle pivot in the center snagging like a frame, warped by humid warmth. Should you have entered our kitchen during my early years, the aroma would have greeted you with overcooked coffee lingering on the hot plate, mingled with cinnamon and the fresh scent of laundry soap, as Mom tackled folding chores right there at the counter. The wall calendar brimmed with her neat blocky script, dentist visits, pet vaccinations, her shifts at the hospital's accounts department, maintenance reminders for Dad's pickup. Madison's special day got the calendar slot bloated with hearts and excited punctuation. Mine appeared neat and minimal, just one lone asterisk. Dad once sketched a cheerful grin there, only for Mom to rub it away and jot down the timing for Madison's volleyball dinner instead. If you've never seen your own doodled smile vanish like that, you might not grasp how a minor erasure can shift like an earthquake. At age 6, with Madison at 7, we both mastered biking in one single evening. Dad gripped the rear of her frame and dashed along the pavement in his heavy work shoes that smacked the ground like cheering claps. She teetered a couple of times before steadying and soaring off, a vibrant pink flash accented by streamers on the grips. I lingered by the sidewalk edge, clutching my navy bicycle and a headgear that squeezed under my jaw. "Hold on a moment, Em," Mom shouted, the tone you'd use summoning a store clerk while dashing off for forgotten milk. "Just a beat and we'll launch you next." Madison circled the neighborhood like a shooting star. As she returned, Dad let out a triumphant yell, smacked his palms together, and declared, "That's my champ. Did you catch that, Lind?" Mom chuckled and confirmed she had. I perched there, toes carving shallow crescents into the gutter, forcing my expression to remain neutral. "One moment more," Mom repeated. "Maddie, demonstrate that fancy pivot for your dad." Twilight had settled in by the point when they recalled my presence. The entry lamp flickered alive. Gnats zeroed in on my legs as if tallying participants. Dad at last hurried over, panting and elated, placing his broad palm midway down my back. "Okay," he murmured. "Kiddo, time to pedal." We'd covered barely 8 homes before he released, and upon doing so, I veered right into Mr. Pewett's shrubbery. After all, navigating blackness proves impossible without prior lessons on the road's layout. Mom's giggle drifted over, a sound I'd come to fear in its form. Dad remarked I ought to have observed my sister's technique. He added, "You tend to complicate matters unnecessarily, Em." By 9 years old, I'd honed the skill of gauging the household vibe. A glance at Mom's clenched chin, the tilt of Dad's cap on the entry rack, the jumble of footwear near the rear entrance, and I could predict the evening's mood. A pleasant one involved Dad manning the barbecue while Mom refilled her Chardonnay, with no one broaching the utility costs. A rough one brought heavy silence, followed by excessive clamor. During those tough stretches, Madison would arrive at dinner spinning engaging yarns, nearly landing on the student council, her coach praising her strong spike despite her youth, and our parents would brighten as if freshly powered up. If I chimed in, my comments would slip away unnoticed, tumbling underfoot, and as you might know, utterances discarded like that get gathered in a dustpan and tossed without a second glance. There came a particular celebration. Allow me to paint the picture, as it's the type that illuminates so many others. My 9th birthday. Mom whipped up a dessert, filling the entire dwelling with a cozy blanket of sugary warmth. As she extracted it from the heat, her brow furrowed. "Darn," she muttered. "Red velvet, just like Maddie's." She voiced it as if caught off guard, despite it being the 3rd consecutive occasion. "You enjoy red velvet as well, right, Em?" She'd commenced blending the tangy icing already, signaling the query was mere politeness. Truth be told, red velvet doesn't appeal to me. It resembles a hidden truth masquerading amid cocoa. Yet I bobbed my head, for if you've navigated girlhood in that particular vein, you recognize that denial, blowing out candles, won't halt tempests. During the celebration, Mom cut hefty portions for everyone and passed me a skimpy edge slice with barely any icing. Madison grabbed a couple, chuckling as she mentioned bulking up ahead of her rehearsal. Once the candles appeared, there were fewer than anticipated. An even batch Mom had rummaged from a cabinet. Madison bent in my direction, near enough for me to spot the tiny golden flecks in her gaze. "Wish for something huge," she urged, almost challenging me. "I want to be noticed," I thought. I puffed. The wisps of smoke twisted into the kitchen glow and vanished. In class, I performed well. More than well, in fact. I was that student who etched faint marks on exams with my pencil from gripping too tightly. Instructors sent comments about my literacy skills. Ms. Caldwell allowed me to perch on the carpet and recite stories when the group got restless, since my tone remained even like a timer, calming the room like falling flakes. Madison's educators dispatched notes too, though theirs carried a distinct flavor. Madison leads the pack. Madison's vibe spreads like wildfire. Madison requires space to sparkle. A B earned her festive inflatables. An A from me drew just a brief acknowledgement from Dad across the table. "Isn't that the norm?" he remarked. I figured out to stash my triumphs away like polished pebbles from a stream. I'd pull them out and examine them solo. You could assume I'm resentful. I'm not, or at least, not solely. I serve as a meticulous archivist of minor details. That's a distinction. By junior high, the community felt tighter, like a garment shrunk from an unintended hot cycle. You couldn't step anywhere without grazing someone's tail. Madison's narratives loomed large, vivid, and expansive. Mine stayed bordered, hidden from sight. Some girls sought me out, those navigating corridors as if charting paths ahead, craving a companion who heard without cutting in. Over midday meals, we'd swap energy bars and experiment with dramatic liner in our device screens. To an observer, we seemed like typical teens with flaking polish and hidden truths. To a listener, our exchanges revealed how we sustained each other's spirits. Madison observed. She forever observed. Her stare prickled at the nape of my neck from the dining hall's far side. She resented me having what she lacked, even if it was merely a spot to gather where I could grin freely. Eventually, she approached, plunked her plate, and launched into a boisterous account of the coach, hinting at her potential as team head. My pal offered a courteous grin, the kind conditioned into us for those prowling the edges. Then Madison fixed on me and declared, "Watch who you associate with, Em. Mom mentions Kayla's folks allow guys over unsupervised." Kayla's face flushed crimson. A snap echoed inside me. Not a fracture like bone, but akin to a fragile shank. "That's false," I murmured softly. Yet Madison had already sauntered off, content like she'd ignited a blaze and retreated to admire the flames. That evening at home, while Mom sorted through drugstore bills without glancing up, she noted, "Your sibling claims you're mixing with a wild bunch." She delivered it flatly, like forecasting rain. Dad rustled his newspaper sharply, as if editorializing. "You needn't emulate your sister," he tacked on, which struck me as ironic since the reality was I couldn't mimic her, no matter the desire. Certain entrances demand a key passed from another. After that, I avoided inviting pals over. The home had this peculiar habit of contracting around the ones I favored. Mom adopted her soft interrogative tone. Dad posed inquiries that doubled as judgments. Madison would fall silent in a lurking manner, only to later post-departure claim my guest had swiped a trifle, a tube of gloss, a carnival wristlet, a 10-spot from the counterpot, and my folks credited her instinctively. Mom would murmur, "I'd rather not suspect," yet an item vanished. And Madison spotted it initial. Then she'd exhale dramatically, and I'd witness my companion diminish before my eyes and depart, arms wrapped tight. I'd reflect, I won't expose others to pain here. I won't let them discover what I've long grasped. Thus, we gathered in green spaces, cafes, and vehicles with vents wide. We discovered our contours amid borrowed surroundings. That's an education of sorts. Senior year cracked the locale wide, reminiscent of autumn cleaving a melon, all vibrant crimson, pips, and juicy allure. Abruptly, spirit assemblies, campus flags, and murmurs of aid packages emerged. Madison landed a bow sporting a varsity sweater, reeking of scent and engine grease. Dad adored him. He'd pat the lad's shoulder at supper as though inducting him via sheer enthusiasm. "Firm grip there," Dad would note, as if appraising a vital sign. Mom glowed. I aimed for civility, I achieved it. I caught how Madison's gaze tracked me whenever that boy chuckled at my quips. The initial guy who ever invited me on a date did so beside the snack dispensers right after math class. He came across as endearing in his awkward manner, with this tick of sliding a palm along the nape of his neck whenever nerves hit, which was pretty much always. He blurted, "I think you're," and trailed off, since imagining courage and actually summoning it can feel like entirely separate challenges. He tried once more. "I enjoy how you recite passages in literature class." He rushed out as if dumping the contents of a pail. I agreed, because no one had ever praised my speaking voice in quite that manner. Right there under the humming glow of the overhead bulbs, I sensed a part of me unfolding, while another part coiled tight to shield that vulnerability. Bringing him back to our place wasn't something I desired. Naturally, Mom wouldn't hear of it. "If this is getting real with somebody, we ought to meet him," she declared, talking as though familiarity was some sacred blessing. The evening he showed up for pasta, greens, and herb toast, Madison materialized at the landing in an outfit that hadn't hung in her wardrobe earlier that day. She draped herself over the railing like it was scenery in a production starring her as the star. Over the meal, she quizzed my date on his favorite tunes and shared giggles with him over some group I'd never come across. As I rose to assist Mom with clearing the table, Madison trailed me to the sink area and murmured, "He's adorable. Has he figured out who you really are?" No expression twisted her features. It wasn't necessary. I went rigid inside. Out on the veranda afterward, my guy brushed my arm. "Your sibling shared a bunch of details about you that seemed none of her concern," he mentioned. His look held gentleness mixed with confusion. "She mentioned you're quick to envy, that you pry into things." He paused to swallow. It didn't sit right. I felt a small spark of affection for his honesty. Not the enduring sort, more like something tucked away in a box, similar to a dried bloom. My folks sided with Madison, without question. Mom slid her spectacles lower on her bridge and scrutinized me as if adjusting a lens to sharpen the view. "I'm only trying to guide you towards smart decisions," she offered, the type of phrase that mimics affection until you catch the underlying implication, the bit implying you can't handle them independently. Dad crossed his limbs and warned that fellows detect disorder in a young woman. "They exploit it," he added, "or bolt." The whole thing crumbled beneath that constant scrutiny. It's tough to explore intimacy with someone when your sibling pops up constantly, like an ad break. Once it fizzed out, Madison lingered in my entryway, her expression dripping with faux concern. That struck me as the cruelest sight yet. "Aw, sweetie," she cooed, almost like a soothing tune. You'll meet someone who matches your pace. I skipped inquiring what pace she imagined for me. I closed the door. Here's the truth about being the overlooked sibling in a compact home. You figure out how to hide your strength in unusual spots. I stashed mine within pages, since no one monitors a female absorbed in reading. It passes for compliance. I buried it in those all-nighters cramming while the residents fell silent, save for the muted fibs drifting from a distant screen. I invested it in a tomorrow I couldn't fully envision, but sensed approaching, akin to a shift in the air. At the dining surface, I laid out pamphlets on universities, vocational courses, and grants I'd copied from the local branch. I scheduled my digging for times when Madison was away, and Mom pulled her overnight factory run. Dad would pass by, spot the clutter of documents, and mutter, "Don't rush things," treating my optimism as if it were impulsive, as if aspiration could somehow burden the household financially. Madison's higher ed chatter flowed differently. It involved campus visits, fresh tops, and scents that evoked a grand entrance hall. Mom tossed around terms like heritage and networks. Dad vowed, "We'll ensure it works out for our Maddie." He delivered it with conviction, the kind absent for me. For my path, it was merely, "We'll figure it out." I trained myself to file those "we'll figure it out" lines alongside the dried bloom in that compartment, pulling them forth solely when ready to face something delicate. During Sunday services, the moms would glance at Madison, then shift to me. That prompted a urge to perch up high, despite Mapleton First Baptist lacking such a spot. Madison exchanged greetings and gathered flattery like jewelry. I arranged seating, served beverages, and returned carrying the aroma of instant dairy on my skin. Following one teen fundraiser auto scrub, a person tucked a $20 note into Madison's container and noted, "You've got a bright future ahead." I observed Madison's lips curve gently. How Mom's arm looped around Madison's side. I carried my own canister back, barely filled, and tallied the contents in solitude, murmuring the totals softly, like invocations. Looking for the instant when everything shifted. There wasn't just one. It built through a string of subtle slopes. Then suddenly, I glanced around and saw I'd been climbing steadily for ages. Yet a particular episode lingers, much like a taste that haunts well after the dish is cleared. It's the waning chill of my 11th grade term. The sugar tree out front holds a thin layer of frost coats each limb, revealing the tree's bare structure in stark honesty. Madison's back from her initial college term at that school, we're not mentioning, in our family, putting a name to something hands it the leverage to shame you later. Mom's jotting down a shopping list for the market. Dad's surfing through TV stations, dismissing every show as awful. I'm seated at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, scholarship forms, an essay prompting me to describe an obstacle and my triumph over it. "Listen," Mom blurts out abruptly, her tone feigning nonchalance like she's rehearsing lines. "We need to discuss something with you, Em. Your sister's school fees, they're steep, higher than we expected. For your plans, we're considering a deferral year, maybe pick up some work, build savings. We'll check in again after Madison's sophomore year. If finances improve, who knows?" I've mastered steady breathing through any storm. I practice it right then. Draw in, release. "A deferral year?" I echo. "Not as discipline," Dad chimes in, "merely sensible." "I could look into loans," I counter, since I've researched thoroughly. Got a binder tagged "Possibilities," clipped with something sharp enough for defense. Mom sets her pen aside softly, as though her words alone will sting plenty. "Borrowing's no light matter, sweetie, and you've got such a gentle spirit. We hate for you to commit to a burden that lingers forever." She eyes Madison, ensuring the message sticks. "We'll guide you on what's valuable when the moment arrives." Madison, draped in one of my cardigans like it's hers by right, tilts her head and offers a feline grin. "Plenty of solid gigs around here," she remarks. "You could stash cash and sort out your true path. Not everybody's cut for university life." It's remarkable how swiftly tension clouds the air. I recall the metallic tang in my mouth, the quiver in my fingers, concealed by neatening documents. the decision to hold my tongue, like gripping a hidden blade. Appreciate you considering my future, I reply, ever the daughter skilled at faking thanks when trapped. Upstairs in my space, I arrange every form across the quilt and iron them flat, like invoking a rite. I craft an essay starting thus. Some folks claim their journey's a steady climb. For me, it's a rusty ladder down a brick wall. I cover the sheet, I output it, I mail it off with postage and a quiet hope. I've discovered the pleas that suit me aren't pleas to reshape others. They're bids for an exit that stays ajar. The season shifts to spring, vibrant and bold. I stay focused. I weave achievement ribbons into my routine like stitching. Weekends find me at the local bake shop, scented with weekend warmth midweek. The proprietor, a bereaved woman called Ruth whose palms bear traces of dough, shares tales from her youthful urban days. Of the fellow she adored, handy with repairs given patience. Of acquiring this spot to rise amid yeasty aromas. Folks imagine romance as melody, she confides while shaping pastries. Oftentimes it's simply enacting one solid choice day after day until it shapes existence. The notification hits when I'm away. At the shop, post-morning frenzy, devices hushed. Ruth auditing the dough rises in the rear. I clean my palms, check my cell, and spot it. A header in plain terms, full scholarship. Reality bursts like a fragile orb, then reassembles, softer around the edges. The message holds lines I'd scarcely dreamed. Costs waived, expenses handled, room allowance provided, congratulations. I drop onto a perch and chuckle, then cover my lips. Such glee mimics soaring. In my world, soaring happens unseen. Ruth spots me, cups my face with her dusted hand. Well, she beams, gaze sparkling. I landed it, I murmur. Ruth, I did it. She skips the I-figured routine, instead, naturally. So what treat are we whipping up to share the triumph? I share with my folks by sharing online beforehand. Not spiteful, strategic. In our clan, a broadcast victory serves as shield. Retracting joy proves tougher once the neighborhood's woven it into their day. The update's straightforward, no boasting. I type, deeply thankful, eager to dive in. Shout out to educators, bakers, and book guardians who believed. Replies sprout, accumulate. Mom rings, her breathing quickened. This is huge, she exclaims. Joy flickers for precisely 5 beats before her inflection pivots. From elation to planning, smooth as shifting from pause to motion. Certain it's legit, scams abound. Dad's rumble filters from off mic, distorting the line. Probe the details, he demands. There's always the small details in the footnotes. Madison never picks up the phone. That evening, as I return home, she's perched on the sofa, her complexion pale like storm clouds. Her gaze follows me as I move through the space. You were fortunate, she remarks. I stay silent. She utters it again, as though examining the phrase in a looking glass. You were fortunate. A piece of me itches to dismiss it with a shoulder lift and accept the term as is. Fortune carries a gentle ring. It absolves. It resembles a seed head drifting on the breeze. Yet abruptly I'm recalling all those evenings at the dining table. Every technique I picked up to steady my breathing amid attempts to disorient me regarding the room's chill. I earned it, I murmur softly. And sure, there's invariably a touch of chance involved. Madison offers a grin akin to the one you give a pup when canines aren't your favorite. All right, she replies, rising to her feet. It's not as if you're headed to an elite university. No big deal. She infuses that no big deal with every ounce of disdain a young woman can cram into a single word. I ought to mention that I departed for school that August, and a fresh existence unfolded like a freshly unveiled pain, which is accurate, but that's material for another time. The key element right now is the atmosphere in the home during the weeks following the award. My mom navigates the spaces cautiously, as if determined to avoid jostling any fixtures. My dad steers clear of me at first, then swings to the opposite extreme, arriving with a convenience store pastry topped by a lone candy-striped wick, placing it on the surface like an olive branch. Madison amplifies her volume, then dials it back, then ramps it up once more. The residence itself appears to pause, as though it's absorbed that we're on the verge of encountering altered selves, and remains uncertain whether to cheer us on or cling to its own customary groans. This marks the final moment prior to the subsequent segment. It's a Tuesday evening, with the insects chirping away. I'm out on the veranda, surrounded by a pile of gratitude cards, scripting in tidy cursive. My father emerges and positions himself next to me, staring off at the road as if it holds solutions. "I'm impressed by your achievements," he states, eyes averted. The phrase feels awkward on his tongue. It snags on the identical pivot where my name invariably did. "You're managing okay." I glance his way, and briefly he's the fellow dashing after a rosy bike, and briefly I'm the child pedaling into a shrubbery under cover of night. "Appreciate it," I respond, and I truly do. From within, Madison chuckles at whatever's on her screen, a chuckle resembling a chime that's grown weary of its role. My mother summons her by name, the call drifting airy and light. I slip yet another card into its casing. I seal the edge firmly, like sealing a vow. As I eventually retire, I draw the shades and observe the sycamore at its bare framework, pondering Ruth's words. At times, affection means performing the identical positive deed repeatedly until it forms an existence. For me, that positive deed is straightforward. Persist in selecting myself through the tiniest choices possible, until someday, those selections resemble a portal swinging wide. The portal will swing open, though initially there'll be a ceremony, a scheme, and my sibling in attire that doesn't suit her. Yet that's, as folks put it, a separate segment. The initial occasion I traversed the grounds at Riverton State, it seemed someone had boosted the vibrancy of the entire scene. The masonry structures shone a richer crimson than any familiar sight from my hometown. The turf in the central square gleamed so vividly emerald, as if brushed fresh that morning. Learners lounged on spreads, absorbed in books, chats, dozes, and nobody appeared vigilant for the critical judgment from others. I clutched my award documents against my side like a flotation device and mused, "This is the flavor of breath." My residence hall chamber sat on the third level of a structure predating my elders' union. The heater rattled come colder months. The panes jammed during warmer spells. My companion in the space, a young woman from Charlotte by the name of Sierra, affixed twinkling strands over our sleeping spots and ignited violet-scented sticks that likely breached regulations, yet evoked renewal. During our inaugural evening, she collapsed onto her bedding and inquired, "So, what's your background?" I parted my lips, then closed them. My background stretched too far for that instant. Rather, I noted, I enjoy voicing literature aloud. She beamed. "Perfect. You can rouse me during those 3 a.m. essay sessions." Liberty carries an audio for me. It echoed in my solo strides along corridors where anonymity reigned. It rang in the snap of my access card granting library entry at the stroke of 12. It pounded in my chest as I lifted my arm in lecture, and an instructor noted, "Solid observation, Emma." I mastered the transit routes. I discovered the savor of chickpea wraps from the vendor by the lab facility. I realized the dining hall fare improved when savored beneath foliage. I rang my folks on Sundays initially. My mom queried my meals. My dad probed my scores. Madison joined via loudspeaker occasionally, her tone like a feline murmuring from hiding. "No romantic interest yet," she'd quip. "Don't delay excessively, Memsi University marks the peak season." I'd chuckle softly and reply, "Time will tell." Gradually, I dialed fewer times. I dispatched cards in lieu, scribbling lines on climate, lectures, the rodents in the central area, campuses where the grass crept right up to your sneakers. The fewer details they had, the more room I had to maneuver. I encountered Daniel at an off-campus cafe, the sort with eclectic cups and shelves of novels gathering dust. He occupied a spot in the corner, laptop open, expression suggesting he'd absorbed a trio of quips that morning and anticipated another. His gaze held you not as a riddle to unravel, but as a tale worth hearing out. Our chat began with the novel clutched in my grasp, Toni Morrison's Sula, and stretched on for 2 full hours without pause. As he rose to depart, he remarked, "Next week, same spot," as if it were the simplest routine imaginable. That pattern took hold. Lattes, dialogues, the gradual intertwining of our paths. Daniel stood in stark contrast to Madison's suitors. He never pressured. He never measured up. He truly heard. In moments of frustration, he'd fall silent, pondering his words first. In joy, his chuckles rang out like a gate swinging wide. Pursuing a degree in political science, he also pulled evening shifts at the university's guard station, a gig he dubbed compensated observation. He enjoyed spotting rhythms, predicting folks' subsequent moves. Occasionally, during films, he'd forecast the conclusion and nail it. Not clairvoyant, he once confided over a flawed ceramic cup. Just observant. That's when it struck me. I devoted my existence to vigilance out of necessity. His sprang from intrigue. The distinction matters. We proceeded unhurriedly. We strolled all over. We whipped up spaghetti in his cramped flat, complete with its tilted burner. We shared stories of our upbringings and the legacies we hoped to forge. When I disclosed Madison's saga in fragments, he refrained from cutting in or dispensing counsel. Instead, he murmured, "That's heavy," and clasped my fingers. One evening, marking our year's milestone, we perched on the university stairs beneath a starlit canopy, resembling scattered grains on dark fabric. He inquired, "Ever think of returning?" alluding to Mapleton. I replied, "Solely for those who'd shown me warmth." He inclined his head. "Folks often chat about handling scenarios like yours," he noted. Me, I take action. A faint grin crossed his face. Not a warning, just my nature. In that instant, I first envisioned him as a potential spouse. Our engagement unfolded discreetly, solely between us. No fanfare, no decorations. It resembled offloading a burdensome load you'd borne so long its weight had faded from memory. We concurred that rituals held little appeal. Our priority, funds for an adventure, perhaps through Europe or by rail over the Rockies. Yet, plotting the invitees revealed his kin dispersed nationwide, while mine remained rooted in Ohio. A local affair proved practical. "If we host it back home," Daniel suggested, "we can dedicate extended breaks to organizing, nothing elaborate." Anxiety gripped me at the prospect of presenting him to my folks. Time had mellowed certain recollections, smudging them like a faded snapshot. A portion of me hoped for transformation. Another portion recognized the futility. I warned Daniel against solitary time with them. He met my eyes, brows arched. "As if I haven't readied myself," he quipped. He revealed a compact voice recorder, pocket-sized. "For proof," he added, smirking, "or memories." He ventured to see them solo. I lingered in our place, striding back and forth. Upon his return much later, his gaze sparkled, akin to thrill-seekers post-ride. "Sweetheart," he began, "you'd hardly credit it." He recounted it all, how my parents had seated him formally, how Madison had balanced on a chair's edge in a pristine summer frock, as if practicing her role, how they'd proposed funding our nuptials with a single stipulation. Madison would process down the aisle ahead, garbed in bridal attire, at my ceremony. Their rationale. Custom, Daniel explained, yet it echoed a melodramatic serial. He extracted the device like a conjurer unveiling a trick. "It's documented." The space seemed to sway. I'd anticipated they'd twist the event around Madison, but this exceeded imagination. Rage didn't surge first. Rather, a vacant sorrow settled, urging me to collapse and fixate on the overhead until equilibrium returned. Daniel crouched before me, palms upon my legs. "Listen," he urged. "This presents a chance. We decide our reaction." Evenings found us at the dining nook, outlining strategies. A few bordered on audacious, sham locations, misleading cards, intricate hoaxes. Daniel's sibling, the reliable sort in their clan, cautioned via call about legal risks and complications. "If revenge is your aim," he advised, "execute it neatly. Make it untraceable." Ultimately, we opted for the most straightforward approach. Pretend acceptance. Allow them the illusion of dominance. Then engage guards to bar Madison. It served as retribution, certainly, but more so as safeguard. It granted me a single untainted day. Daniel nailed his performance without a hitch. He returned to my folks and assured them he got where they were coming from. He mentioned how I avoided arguments and probably wouldn't kick up a fuss if caught off guard. He subtly pointed out that, given my track record with guys, their advice was just bouncing back at them. He positioned himself as the one steering me right. He proposed they cover some add-ons to make the offer more appealing. They swallowed it whole. Madison, he noted, practically bounced with delight. He ensured no part of the scheme ever hit paper. They bought every bit of it. In the meantime, we leveraged their grip to level up every detail. We'd sample the budget meal choice. Then Daniel would let out a heavy breath in front of Madison and remark, "Too bad we can't swing the nicer version." That would prompt Madison to insist our parents fund the premium pick, so her big moment felt truly spectacular. We pulled the same move with the blooms, the snapper, even the cloth coverings for the tables. We dubbed it payback in feelings. Daniel was over the moon. I never figured floral setups would thrill me," he confessed one evening. "But seeing them foot the bill for the arrangement you really desire. Perfection." I, who'd once eyed a quick city hall ceremony to bank cash for our getaway, now slipped into sessions trying on a frock that draped like liquid silk. My parents had nudged me toward a gown that missed the mark, but since my mom had messaged about it, I had the digital trail to push back. Daniel feigned support for Madison's idea to sabotage my outfit and shoved me into their choice. "They're handing us the whole storyline," he chuckled, shaking his head. Throughout it all, Madison deployed her go-to moves. She pinged Daniel with texts. She unintentionally grazed his arm. He played the torn role to bolster the narrative, but stayed firmly on bounds. I, who'd always dodged clashes, now chuckled at the idea of being cast as possessive and envious. "Amp it up," I urged him. "Paint me as a total monster." He obliged. It paid off. They avoided committing anything to text. They figured they were outsmarting me. Meanwhile, we were crafting a ceremony on their budget and our rules. Come spring, it was all locked in. We secured the spot. We arranged guards. We mapped out the timeline to the second. We even looped in a pal, an honorary attendant tasked with sending me alerts and stirring diversions if things heated up. Daniel practiced his baffled and furious expression facing the glass. I worked on steady inhales. The evening before the big day, we holed up at a cozy lodge just beyond the city. Daniel stretched out next to me, drawing shapes on my hand. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "belongs to you. Whatever goes down." I gazed at the lazily spinning ceiling blades and reflected on all the paths I'd been warned weren't mine. At least this threshold would swing wide. And Madison. She was over at my parents' place, easing into a pilfered ivory number, practicing a strut that was doomed to fizzle. The spark was struck. Wedding morning broke with that rare quiet typical of summer's end, right before the heat intensifies. The lodge carried scents of brewed java and crisp bedding. A gentle wind rustled the maples outdoors, like fingers combing tresses. I stirred ahead of the chime and lingered, attuned to Daniel's rhythmic breaths. Briefly, I allowed a vision of a normal routine. No plots, no baggage, merely a duo on the verge of vows. Then I flipped over and breathed. "We set." He cracked an eyelid, flashed a smile, and replied, "Always have been. We'd run through it all." The guard team lead, a sturdy, even-keeled guy called Carl, who could have doubled in action flicks, had his directives. Our mole would post up by the entry, device at the ready, primed to ping me intel. The attendants were briefed to trail my dad's cues without looping me in, to sustain the facade. My dad imagined he'd direct a dramatic unveiling. Truth was, he was setting up an entirely alternate scene. At the site, the cool air system droned softly amid the buzz of tension. The space buzzed with pedals and gentle tunes as folks settled in. I slipped into my attire leisurely, relishing the material's hush against my body. Peering into the reflection, I barely knew the woman staring back. Not from the garb, but from the serenity etched on her features. For so long, I'd been the type to recoil. Now, I appeared rooted in my own space. A notification pinged. "She's approaching. 5 mins out." I released a breath. Follow-up chime, Dad's at the front. Tunes kicking off shortly. It was aligning perfectly. I lingered in the holding area, fingers intertwined. Via the door's slim gap, I spotted attendees fidgeting in rows, leaflets waving like jittery wings. My dad gave the cue to the planner. The processional melody rose, the panels parted, and it was I who stepped forward. My dad's gaze jerked upward, jaw dropping. For an instant, he scanned past me, anticipating Madison in her swiped, snowy attire. But there stood only Carl by the threshold, solid as a barrier, vetting the roster. My dad's cell buzzed. He eyed the screen. It was her. He muttered a phrase. Something see. The usher approached, then moved out of the way, stranding me right at the doorway. A wave of shocked inhales swept across the gathering, rustling like leaves in a breeze. Our ally, fully in character, raised her voice so the whole crowd could catch it. What exactly did that signify? This wasn't meant for you at all. She bolted toward the front, stirring up a buzz of intrigue. Attendees craned their necks. Murmurs rippled outward. I drew in a steadying breath and started my procession down the walkway. My father-in-law, poised as the stand-in, advanced and extended his elbow. His gaze held genuine kindness. "Time to tie the knot," he whispered softly. I grinned and gripped it tightly. At the altar's edge, Daniel stood ready, his expression a mask of feigned concern for the onlookers, yet his gaze lit up exclusively for me. "You're nailing this," he breathed as I arrived. "Totally award caliber." We exchanged our promises amid a subdued hum of guesses. Folks drifted away and came back, their devices vibrating with news from the foyer. My folks never reappeared. Still, the ritual pressed forward. As the celebrant declared us wed, cheers surged like ocean waves, laced with sighs of ease and lingering questions. During the party afterward, the menu and beverages we'd selected, elevated per Madison's stipulations, circulated generously. Revelers swayed on the floor, chuckled heartily, and went out of their way to offer me heartfelt best wishes, almost compensating for the spectacle they'd observed. I spotted Daniel dropping the act, beaming as he eyed the dessert. "Totally justified every moment," he remarked. The complete tale unfolded for me gradually, pieced together like a puzzle. Carl at the entrance informing Madison she'd clearly picked the incorrect spot since another bride was present. My dad attempting to intimidate him with law enforcement threats. Carl serenely suggesting he dial them up personally. Our companion showing up right on cue, shouting and delaying, whipping up a commotion that drew a larger audience into the corridor. My mom emerging, face pale with distress. Madison sprawled on the ground in her ivory gown, wailing and thrashing about like a toddler. My dad flushed crimson with fury, my mom in tears, visitors capturing it all on their mobiles. Daniel called down to the entrance hall, adopting his most bewildered demeanor, rejecting every accusation, insisting on evidence. "How could I possibly consent to anything so twisted?" he proclaimed audibly. "You're out to sabotage her big day." Lacking messages or correspondence, my parents had only their claims, and this time those claims fell flat. By the moment they got escorted away, the assembly had soured against them. Even kin who'd stayed courteously detached were appalled. They truly expected Madison to parade down the path, one person grumbled. At Emma's ceremony, nobody could rationalize it. They departed amid a haze of chatter and snapping photos. Carl shared later that he'd never received such a generous gratuity or savored a shift quite like it. Within the venue, the festivities shone brighter. Crowds grooved with more vigor, jested more boisterously, seeming to occupy the void left by my relatives. Finally, the occasion centered on me and the partner I'd selected. Finally, I didn't need to atone for simply being. That evening, back in the suite, I slipped off my heels and perched on the mattress with a portion of frosting-laden treat in hand. Daniel emerged from the bath, locks still wet, and noted, "You were stunning up there." I chuckled, a bit unhinged from the release. "We pulled it off," I replied. They gave it a shot, yet we claimed our moment. He settled next to me and tapped his utensil to mine in a cheer. To entrances that remain unlocked, he toasted. In the months since, my parents have attempted contact. Madison fired off a text so deranged that Daniel quipped about mounting it on the wall. She accused me of causing her embarrassment, labeled him a duplicitous viper, forecasted his infidelity. He captured screenshots of it all, forwarding them to the relatives' shared thread alongside their ignored attempts, appending a composed request for aid in curbing the badgering. My extended family mobilized, vowing to intervene, urging us to savor our getaway. At last, support shifted in our favor without my effort. Occasionally, reflecting on that occasion, I skip over Madison's meltdown or my dad's scowl. Instead, I envision crossing that portal as the melody built, the gossip swelled, and I advanced regardless. I see Daniel there, unwavering, gaze alight. I see my fingers steady. Folks often inquire if it smacked of payback. It did somewhat, but beyond that, it resembled seizing back what I'd been denied ownership of, an occasion, a decision, an existence. We devoted ages to caution, strategy, vigilance. Then, at long last, we entered our narrative. Certain times I yearn for an altered family, for that home with the green shutters to have offered gentler foundations. Yet other instances, as I linger in our cooking space, Daniel brewing Java, illumination spilling over the surfaces, I reflect, we constructed this. We shaped it through tiny gestures, iterated until they pulsed with life. And atop the range, beside the seasoning, sits a modest frame. Within lies a copy of Madison's rant, the bit dubbing Daniel a viper and claiming he'd deceived them for ages. Underneath, in bold capitals, Daniel inscribed, "Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss." It cracks us up each glance. It's no typical bridal snapshot that folks usually display on their walls. Yet this one belongs to us.